Well.
Fucking Mexicans.
Oh, man, do not get me started on the Mexicans.
Hey, I'll just say it. They hold the goddamn economy together.
You know what, man? Damn straight. If 12% of the Mexicans who live in this country stopped working, just 12%, the USA would shut down.
I don't even care who hears me.
No.
They work their asses off, and they got strong family values.
Essential immigrants.
Hey, speaking of immigrants, how about the Indians?
Fucking Native Americans.
I don't know if I could get in trouble these days for saying something like this, but they were here first.
It may be unpopular, but it's true.
We came to this country and we steamrolled on in and we genocided them. I mean, hell, we owe them something.
There you go.
Where are we?
Right now you're in a kind of a limbo. You're neither here nor there.
Where exactly am I? Between light and shadow.
Hey kids, welcome back to Between Light and Shadow. I'm your host, Craig, and, well, hell, it's happened again. I keep meaning to cover 2 episodes of this new Twilight Zone series at a time, but I keep hitting episodes that, for one reason or another, demand their own spotlights. It all started with the 3rd episode, Replay, then continued with 6 Degrees of Freedom, and then Not All Men, which is most certainly not on the level of those other 2, but I evidently had so much to say about it that it ended up being way too long for a half episode. So my plan was to cover episodes 8 and 9 together. I'd already watched both of them by the time Not All Men ballooned out of control, and neither of them struck me as particularly outstanding. Now, that's not to say I didn't like them, but I didn't think I'd have that much to say about them, so I could easily cover them both in an hour. But, oh goodness, how things can change after repeat viewings. This new Twilight Zone is a highly political, highly provocative endeavor. We shouldn't be surprised by this. Executive producer Jordan Peele's work has always had a political, or at least a socio-political bent, going back to his Key and Peele days. But what has been surprising, and off-putting for some, is the heavy-handedness employed to imbibe these new stories with what you might call messages. There's a clear liberal point of view at work here, which has had a polarizing effect on viewers. Whereas the original Twilight Zone employed subtle social commentary to make its point, and could therefore appeal to the masses regardless of their partisan inclinations, this new series is rather forcefully and loudly telling the world exactly how far left its heart lies. That's not to say you can't tell an effective story that way, but it is jarring when you compare it with Serling's original efforts. I mean, I'm a pretty liberal guy in most respects, but even though I agree with many of the sentiments conveyed in these episodes, I sometimes bristle at the leaden, obvious way it hammers its intended points home. The offensiveness ranges from really minor, like Replay, which I really like, to really obnoxious, The Wonderkind, which I really don't like. Each episode has a particular social concern woven into its narrative fabric, and this latest one is no different. It's another hot-button topic that we see very frequently in the news and on social media: illegal immigrations. So finally, we get a comedy episode. Hi-oh! I'm kidding. It's not a comedy. In fact, it's the least comedic tale we've seen thus far. Point of Origin, the 8th episode of this new Twilight Zone's inaugural season, premiered on CBS All Access on May 16th, 2019. Since size does in fact matter, I can report that this particular episode runs 43 and a half minutes, which is more or less average for this series. It's directed by Matthias Herndl, who also serves as the director of photography on this and 5 other episodes in this first season of the new Twilight Zone. So he shot 60% of the season and directed 10%. Since he pulled double duty for this one, I hope he got paid twice. The episode is written by John Griffin, who probably got a huge kick out of watching this, since it's his very first produced script. He's currently attached to 2 other projects, a film called Crater that is currently in production, and an adaptation of the graphic novel Romeo and Juliet: The War, which is still being developed. Pretty impressive to have a Twilight Zone episode be your first ever writing credit. Respect. We open on a big, expensive house in a rich neighborhood. It's winter, as evidenced by the snow that rests on the tree branches. It's like a Currier and Ives painting, if Currier and Ives were still knocking them out in these modern times. Oddly, an ice cream truck drives slowly by. Now, don't those usually make the rounds only during the summer? Put a pin in that for now, because if you dwell on the anachronistic idea of an ice cream truck in the winter, you might miss...
E is for egg!
On the side of the ice cream truck, we see Mr. Dingle's ice cream. Obviously, that's a nod to the classic series episode Mr. Dingle the Strong, which, despite starring the wonderful Burgess Meredith, is most certainly not a classic. I hate it. Almost as much as I hate Mr. Beavis.
So down this way is the bathroom, which I would like everyone to use. I don't want semi-strangers using my master bedroom bath. Parents just get to sit in bed. Now, I was thinking of putting a bar here on the house, because that'll force people to live there, right? That's what I was telling you guys. See everything, right?
That's the voice of Eve Martin, your average, everyday, entitled, rich, white suburban housewife. And somewhat predictably, she has an undocumented immigrant for a housekeeper, a kindly Guatemalan woman named Anna. Anna enters the sitting room, where she finds Eve staring up through a large picture window at the blue sky, seemingly in a trance of some sort.
Mrs. Eve? I didn't mean to scare you.
Sorry, I was just in another world there.
I was in another world. Yeah, that right there definitely needs to have a pin put in it. So Anna asks Eve for a favor. It seems they're trying to get her grandson into a certain school.
But my daughter does not live in that district. Can we use your address as his home address? You do live in the school district.
What school, you ask?
The charter school.
Matheson Charter?
E is for egg!
Richard Matheson was a staff writer on the original Twilight Zone, and he contributed a few undeniable classics: The Invaders, Death Ship, Steel, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, and many others. So Eve grants Anna's request, but then mere moments later, a cadre of I.C.E/HSI goons shows up and takes Anna into custody. It's kind of hard to hear amid all the commotion, but one of them says the following into his walkie-talkie. We have a 10:15 Pilgrim confirmed. We shouldn't be at all surprised at the use of the number 1015, as this number has been used in most, if not all, of the episodes in this series. What does it mean? I don't know. 8 episodes in, and I still have no freaking idea. Now, aside from that, the use of the word pilgrim is interesting. We hear words like undocumented and illegal alien constantly in the news, but pilgrim? Later, Eve is having afternoon tea and crumpets, maybe, I don't know, with the other rich suburban housewives on her block.
I gotta say, though, these people know the risks when they come here. What can you do? I mean, it's unfortunate and everything, but it is illegal. The thing is, too, is that the next person you find is just going to have the same problems. Right?
Turns out every one of these women has undocumented help in their homes. Friggin' hypocrites.
Could expose us and them.
There's something oddly, I don't know, sinister about that. If you have another pin on hand, well, use it. We'll come back to it later. Okay, I'm going to pull over for just a sec to get something out of my system. Ginnifer Goodwin is frickin' adorable. Like with a capital A. seriously. Now, I'm not going to play the TZ Babe jingle because after the whole Heather Ann Campbell debacle, I don't want to come off like I'm perving on anybody, but damn, Ginnifer Goodwin sure is cute. Even the way she spells her name is cute. G-I-N, Niffer. Gin. Hey, she could probably get a gig promoting Bombay Sapphire or even start her own line of specialty gins. Hey, if Justin Timberlake can sell tequila, then she can sell gin. Okay, back to business. That night, Eve has a troubling nightmare. Black and white visions of a bombed-out city, perhaps the remnants of a civilization post-nuclear holocaust, and a little girl wandering through the wreckage. There's also a really quick glimpse of a doll's face, scorched and partially melted, which I thought might be another appearance of the Talkie Tina doll from the original series Living Doll. But it was so quick, I couldn't verify it, so I can't throw in the Easter egg jingle. Well, not for a few seconds, anyway. The next morning, Eve is forced to come up with breakfast for the kids since her housekeeper/cook has been removed from the premises. So cold cereal it is.
E is for egg.
The cereal is Frosted Canna-Munch, which is of course a reference to the Canamit aliens from the original series episode To Serve Man, which has already provided a recurring Easter egg in the form of Canamit Lager, which select characters in these new episodes have been seen enjoying. This version of the Easter egg is even better because the slogan, "To serve humans," is emblazoned across the front of the box, which is a variation on the legendary tagline from that iconic episode.
To serve men, it's a cookbook.
There's even a little picture of a Canamit on the box. It's kinda adorable. So now that Eve is without her housekeeper/cook, she's forced to go grocery shopping, and since her housekeeper/cook was also her childcare provider, she's forced to take the kids with her. She takes up 2 parking spaces with her big fat SUV without giving it a second thought, right in front of her kids, even though they point it out to her. Did I mention she's entitled?
And I hate when people park like you. No seas, pendejo.
On the way into the store, the kids say hello to Otto, who appears to be a homeless guy playing a guitar. He's plucking out that classic Woody Guthrie chestnut, "This land is your land," which, yeah, it's gonna come up again later, so remember that too. I hope you brought a damn pin cushion with you for this. Now, inside the store, we see just how removed Eve is from the rigors of normalcy when she tries to use her credit card to pay for her groceries, which includes another box of Frosted Canna-Munch. I'll spare you the jingle this time. She has trouble figuring out the card reader, pissing off the people in line behind her. When she finally does manage to figure it out, well, it doesn't really matter because her card is declined. She tries another card, same thing. Declined. Offended and embarrassed, she leaves without her groceries. She finds a handwritten note on her car that reads, "Your card takes up 2 spaces. You must be so much better than me." And then, to add injury to insult, another cadre of I.C.E/HSI goons shows up. This time, they're there for her. What? As they take her and the kids into custody, Jordan Peele appears as a reflection in the car window, which is clever.
Meet Eve Martin, loving mother, devoted wife, active in her community. Eve was raised to view the world from a bubble of comfort, safety, and privilege. But that bubble is about to burst. And when it does, she will find herself within the strange and unfamiliar borders of the Twilight Zone.
Usual post-intro stinger? Check. Eve is taken to some sort of processing facility. Her husband William arrives, sans kiddos.
They're being held in the juvenile wing upstairs. They won't let me see them.
What is going on, William? My credit cards were declined.
Oh, well, that must be it. It has to be identity theft. Someone hacked your credit cards, and now these people think that you're a terrorist. I have to think this is just a bizarre misunderstanding.
What kind of a gag is this?
I don't know, it's just a gag maybe.
Is that some sort of a gag?
Just a little gag.
This is a gag or something?
Somebody's trying to pull a gag.
This is a gag, isn't it?
All right, what's the gag?
Does that look like a gag to you?
Gag me with the spoon. Gross.
Finally, 8 episodes in, and we're just now getting our first bona fide, it must be some sort of a gag reaction. Okay, he didn't actually say gag, but it's close enough. I mean, nobody says gag anymore. Now, Eve assumes she's being detained because of Anna's Matheson Charter School thing, and she pulls the obvious white person of privilege move.
Whatever we need to do to make things right. A donation to Matheson, or wherever.
Are you suggesting a financial inducement to your release? That is a shame, because this has nothing to do with Mrs. Fuentes at all.
That's the delightful Mr. Allendale, who is an HSI investigator or case manager or someone in a position of unspecified power. And from that position of unspecified power, he drops a bomb on Eve and William.
William, you, Jackie, and Isabel will be released momentarily. Eve will remain with us a bit longer for further evaluation.
What?
Eve, it's in your best interests not to resist.
Eve is fingerprinted, photographed, and endowed with an orange jumpsuit. She is led to a holding area filled with other orange jumpsuited people, passing a familiar face on the way. It's Otto, sweeping the floor. Among the other detainees, she finds her beloved housekeeper/cook/childcare provider, Anna, who isn't exactly happy to see her.
I am so sorry. I had no idea they would take you to a place like this.
Where did you think they would take us? To the Four Seasons?
Did I say this wasn't a comedy? Man, I don't know now. She's killing it up there. Samir Wassan, take notice.
I assumed they would deport you back to Mexico.
I'm from Zacapa. It is in Guatemala. I have been with your family for almost 11 years. I wiped the shit and snot from your children. I sat with Jackie and Isabel when they had fevers, held them when they fell. Tell me, what are the names of my children? When someone is a part of your family, do you know their names?
But that's not all.
I know why you are here. I've known for some time that we've come from the same place. You did try to help Daniel, so I will help you.
Anna leads Eve through a secret door in the bathroom and sends her down a dark corridor where Otto is waiting.
If you want to know why you're here, you gotta come with me now.
She hesitates.
You don't trust me only because I don't look like you. But we're the same.
So both Anna and Otto have told Eve that they all come from the same place. He takes her to a secret room where a woman named Aida is waiting for her.
It's so good to see you again, Eve. You don't remember who you are. We thought the young would never need to know where they came from, that we'd just fit in here.
They hate that we are here. They're rounding us up. And now you need to remember who you are before they do, so they can't unlock your memories.
The people here want to send us back, but this is our home now.
Uh-oh. They've been discovered. Otto beats a hasty retreat while guards rush in and subdue Aida with a taser. Sometime later, Eve finds herself strapped to a table and is paid a visit by Mr. Allendale.
5 years ago, this dimension, in which you and I exist, was infiltrated by one of our neighboring dimensions. 30 years ago, a caravan from that dimension had crossed over into ours. These pilgrims risked everything in the hopes of finding a better dimension. A dimension where the sky is blue.
He places an elaborate mask over her face with many tubes jutting out of it, presumably monitoring facial tics, eye movement, perspiration, etc. Seriously, it looks like they've got her hooked up to a CPAP machine from hell. Some of you may not get that reference. Let's take a brief detour into medical terminology thanks to...
Oh, Wiki, you're so
Continuous positive airway pressure, CPAP, is a form of positive airway pressure ventilation, which applies mild air pressure on a continuous basis to keep the airways continuously open in people who are not able to breathe spontaneously on their own. CPAP devices apply continuous positive airway pressure throughout the breathing cycle. CPAP typically is used for people who have breathing problems, such as sleep apnea. In layman's terms, it's a snore inhibitor. It helps you keep your mouth shut and breathe through your nose like a normal person while you sleep. Me, I'm a hardcore snorer, so yeah, I sleep with one of these CPAP fuckers strapped to my face. On a good night, it's mildly annoying. On not so good nights, it's a pain in the ass. Or the face, I guess. So, there you go.
E is for egg.
Funny, Eve's mask looks really familiar. The nose section is slightly upturned with large nostril holes, and below that is a diagonal slash that looks very much like the asymmetrical upper lip of the pig people from Eye of the Beholder, which, as will become apparent very quickly, shares some thematic similarity with this episode. Allendale pierces her back with some sort of spinal tap device.
And what if I told you that the apparatus you find yourself in can be used to record a pilgrim's biometric response to a range of stimuli from that neighboring dimension? That it is the only truly accurate way to determining a suspected pilgrim's true point of origin.
There's your title. Oh, we also get another...
E is for egg.
We see a black and white spiral design on one of the monitors on the test equipment, presumably manufactured by Whipple Industries, but I didn't see a logo anywhere. It looks exactly like the spinning top spiral scene in the opening titles of the third season of the original series. In fact, I'll bet they just looped that shot. Why recreate something that's already perfect? It's really hard to spot, actually. It's in the background in just one shot.
We learned that this other dimension was a lesser dimension. These pilgrims were diluting the natural evolution of our lives as we know it.
So the government is rounding up these so-called pilgrims, these quote-unquote lesser beings, and segregating them in dark holding cells. Funny, a synonym for segregating is ghettoizing. Suddenly, this is feeling very much like the future police state of Eye of the Beholder.
One of the alternatives. This is simply to allow you to move into a special area in which people of your kind have been congregated.
Congregated? You mean segregated? You ain't in prison, don't you, Doctor? You're talking about a ghetto, aren't you? A ghetto designed for freaks.
In Eye of the Beholder, a woman with a disfigured face is anxiously awaiting the result of her plastic surgery, which was performed by the sympathetic Dr. Bernardi. But Allendale is certainly no Dr. Bernardi. This guy's got a sadistic air about him. You can tell he kinda enjoys his work. So Eve wakes up in the infirmary, having suffered a seizure in the middle of the pilgrim test. A kindly doctor named Mosher, they should have named him Dr. Bernardi, tells her that they've determined that she's not a pilgrim and that they are releasing her. And before she knows it, she's back home with her family. But
when I was strapped to that table, they showed me this other place. And they said they'd be able to tell if I remembered being there.
Eve, it's okay.
No, it's not. You remember my recurring nightmare.
We get black and white glimpses of her nightmare. Scorched trees, a little girl walking through the bombed-out remains of a building, and a lingering close shot of a doll's face.
E is for egg.
Okay, yeah, that is a Talkie Tina doll. The face is mottled with burns, and the glassy eyes stare vacantly into nothing. But yeah, it's definitely Talkie Tina.
The images they showed me in that machine of that place, of this little girl, a little girl who looked like me. It was my nightmare. They showed me my nightmare. How did they do that? How did they know? At times, when I look at the sky, it's like I'm on the brink of recalling some memory.
And suddenly, she's back on that table, face obscured by the mask, Allendale hovering over her.
Just as I suspected. We found another pilgrim.
So she never passed the test, never went home, and now she's incriminated herself. She is a pilgrim. Remember Orwell's 1984, when Winston Smith was forced by the thought police to betray Julia, his forbidden lover? But here, Eve has been tricked into betraying herself. Hypnosis or drugs, it's not clear how they duped her, but the point is, it worked. Back in her cell, Eve is tortured by nightmares of her childhood in the other dimension. She gets a visit from Dr. Mosher, who speaks to her through the meal tray slot of her cell door.
I can get you out if you pay.
Yes, okay. I will pay. Once I get home, I'll make it home, and you can have whatever you want.
But Eve has one condition.
Wait!
Yes?
There is a woman in the main holding area, Anna Fuentes. She has to come with me.
No, just you.
You have to. I can't leave her in here, please. She has children. She has grandchildren.
Later that night, Mosher helps her escape the facility by hiding her and Anna in a bin of garbage. As he pushes the bin down the hall,
E is for egg.
He whistles a very familiar tune. You know, I kind of want to blast the episode for this, because if we're watching an episode of a TV show, then how would a character know the theme music from said TV show? I don't know, maybe they were going for a cute meta thing. Sorry guys, it doesn't work, especially not in such a dark episode. Now, when we get to episode 10, you're going to see the most meta thing ever attempted in any of the Twilight Zone incarnations. Anyway, maybe it's not Mosher whistling after all, because the whistling continues under his dialogue.
What are you doing down here?
Bloodworth told me to take these stiffs to the freezer. There's a wicked infection going around the infirmary on Ward 7. They ain't saying nothing, so they don't have to move the prisoners. But don't go down there.
The guards back up and let him through because, well, wouldn't you? I don't want no wicked infection. On their way out, Mosher gives our pilgrim duo the security code to get out of the building. Guess what number it is?
The code to open it is 1015. Say it.
1015.
That's 2 occurrences of the number 1015 in the same episode. I tell you what, that better pay off huge somehow by the end of the season. So, Eve and Anna make it out of the building, across the snow-covered grounds, and to a chain-link fence, which Mosher has conveniently cut a hole in. Beyond that is a road, where a vehicle pulls up to meet them. It's the ice cream truck. Mr. Dingle's ice cream, for which we already played the Easter egg jingle. Eve climbs inside, but Anna doesn't.
Mrs. Eve, I don't trust them. Anna, we have no choice.
We always have a choice. I have done this before. It is not good to take risks. You cannot trust anybody.
Get the fuck in the car!
No, please. No, please.
Anna flees into the night, against Eve's pleas that she come with her. It's not entirely clear, but it kind of looks like Anna is running back toward the detention facility. The ice cream truck drops Eve off at home at the break of dawn. Eve races inside to find William and the twins standing there. The kids want to run to her, but William holds them back, then sends them upstairs.
Why did you come back here?
You should have run. You're not who you are.
I am the same person. I am the girl's mother. I am your wife.
No, you're not that person. You never were.
And then the La Migra goon squad arrives, led by none other than Mr. Allendale.
Here.
Get out of my home!
No. You leave mine.
As the neighbors look on, Eve is hauled away screaming. The ice cream truck circles around the block one more time, then drives away. We then see Jordan Peele, ice cream cone in hand. And I guess it's healthier than Rod smoking a cigarette. I don't know, has anyone ever done a direct comparison of the health risks associated with smoking and eating ice cream? For all I know, they might be the same.
We are all immigrants from somewhere, be it another city, another country, or another dimension. As a child, Eve Martin escaped to what should have been a better world, a world where the skies are blue. But now those skies have darkened, and the land below them is a place she is no longer welcome. For Eve Martin, there is no passport to be stamped for passage out of the Twilight Zone.
Just like last time, 2 stingers for the price of 1. Funny thing about that, I had attributed its frequent use, or overuse, as simple laziness, but it turns out it's intentional. CBS has released a number of behind-the-scenes promos about different aspects of this new series, usually comments by the on-screen talent about how important the original Twilight Zone was and still is, but they recently dropped one about the music, including a bit about that stinger.
We looked at the original main title theme as a standalone piece that we rarely touched, but what we did do was we created a transition piece that was completely inspired by the original main title.
Landing at the truth this time will require an unscheduled stopover in the Twilight Zone.
That was composers Marco Beltrami and Brandon Roberts, who share compositional duties on the series, and okay, the stinger doesn't bug me as much now. But, I mean, they could have come up with more than one stinger that connects to the original theme, right? But I don't know. Maybe the repetition is yet another way of tying all these episodes together. If the point of origin is to put a person of privilege into the shoes of an apprehended undocumented immigrant and force them to experience firsthand the fear and panic and disorientation therein, then yeah, it does a pretty damn good job of it. The episode successfully conveys the harrowing and surreal nature of what must be nothing short of a nightmare. You're already living precariously, stranger in a strange land, just trying to survive, staying under the radar, maybe only knowing a smattering of the language, always knowing that at any moment you could be caught, incarcerated, and ultimately returned to the place you originally fled from. As awful as that must be, you're still aware of what's happening. But Eve's position is a bit different. She doesn't know she's an illegal immigrant. This is all completely out of nowhere, and she abruptly finds herself out of her depth, out of her comfort zone, and completely lost inside a cyclone of circumstances that make no sense to her. Like Joseph K. in Franz Kafka's The Trial, and like many Twilight Zone protagonists that have come before her. Her plight, boiled down to those essentials, points to the very heart of the Twilight Zone. Rod Serling himself summed it up as follows.
In making a judgment or any analysis or inventory of what are the degrees of emotional reaction and indeed types of emotional reactions, I think there is a universality of reaction to certain given prods. Now, our reaction of fear to a mugging, I think, is relatively universal. There are maybe 8 different types of reactions, but I think you could almost categorize them and put them in paragraph form and put them in a textbook. The worst fear of all is the fear of the unknown working on you, which you cannot share with others. To me, that's the most nightmarish of the stimuli.
Like so many other souls who have wandered into the Twilight Zone or have been intercepted by it, she is alone and afraid, befuddled and bereft, dislocated and discombobulated, depressed and oppressed. I could go on. What we really have here at its core is the old switcheroo, a trope employed by every iteration of the Twilight Zone, a quality of mercy in the original series, Street of Shadows in the 80s series, the Time Out segment of 1982's Twilight Zone the movie, and shades of guilt in the 2002 series. Essentially, it involves an individual being forced into another person's shoes to experience things from their perspective. Point of Origin could have made its point by simply having Eve switch places with Anna through some kind of mystical body swap and gaining insight into the life of someone less fortunate. But the episode beautifully mixes it up by revealing Eve to be both sides of the old switcheroo coin. She's both the entitled rich person and the undocumented immigrant. If the new Twilight Zone must springboard off of previously explored territory, this is how to do it right. Take it somewhere new. Like the 7 episodes we've already covered, Point of Origin is a beautiful production. Eve's home is adorned richly but tastefully, riddled with massive windows looking out over a wintry suburban wonderland. The processing wing of the detainment center is gray, almost stifling in its drabness. The pilgrim holding area is a dark, low-ceilinged affair with harsh shafts of light coming in through the windows. They don't illuminate the room. They simply bisect the darkness. And that biometric response apparatus, the CPAP mask from hell, is a gorgeously rendered thing, with various LEDs creating distorted points of light all over her face, almost like miniature spotlights. And that table she's strapped to, it's ringed by a giant hamster wheel, for lack of a better descriptor, which allows Mr. Allendale and Dr. Mosher to turn her in any direction, flat on her back or completely upright, even upside down, which they don't do, which might have made the whole thing even more bizarre. It's like the table on which Dr. Frankenstein brought his monster to life, taken a few steps further, and that spinal tap poking device that Allendale shoves into Eve's back. It's like a thick hose with multiple sharp protrusions, like surgical steel teeth jutting out of a snake's mouth. The whole interrogation scene is intercut with shots of Eve passing time in her dark cell, doing exercises, tap dancing, crying on the floor, even making shadow puppets on the wall. The whole thing is just off-kilter, surreal, unforgettable. This may be my single favorite sequence in the entire series so far. And call me crazy, but Mr. Allendale looks a hell of a lot like Rod Serling in that black suit and tie, right? Now, aside from the impressive visuals and convincingly oppressive atmosphere, and God, the amazing performances, one of my favorite aspects of Point of Origin is the fact that while it's clearly denouncing the demonizing of immigrants, it's not afraid to at least entertain, albeit briefly, an alternate point of view. Specifically, the idea that perhaps the pilgrims could potentially be a problem after all. When Eve's meeting with Aida is cut short by the taser-wielding guards, Aida quickly turns from an insightful mentor type to a raving street preacher type.
We can't go back home. We're already here. This place is ours now, too, not just theirs.
We belong here! It's ours! Not theirs!
Aida clearly occupies some kind of leadership role among the interned pilgrims. In fact, she may have even been in a position of authority when the caravan first hopped dimensions 30 years earlier. She seems to think that the pilgrims are not only entitled to remain in this dimension, they deserve to claim it as their own. The I.C.E. dude that arrests Eve in the parking garage tells her that she's being taken into custody because...
This is a matter of national security.
Is it possible that Aida has some sort of takeover bid in mind? Is it possible that she's a terrorist? Like a legitimate threat to national security? The very suggestion is a brilliant jab at white America's jealous and zealous claim of ownership over a nation that we fucking stole from someone else. We are the Pilgrims, but like Eve, have apparently forgotten that basic fact. And now we're building walls to keep out other pilgrims. Honestly, how are we any different? The true success of Point of Origin is that it's brave enough to observe, even from a predominantly liberal point of view, that not everything is black and white. This is the position this series needs to be coming from more often. Like everything in life, there are two sides to every story. Even with a clear right or wrong story like Replay, which only a true racist could take offense at, they could have taken a moment or two to explore the idea that monsters aren't born, they are created. And even someone as vile as Officer Lasky could maybe be redeemed somehow. I mean, they definitely had the time. That thing is almost an hour long. But they didn't. They chose to keep things, no pun intended, black and white. That's one of my biggest gripes with this newest version of The Twilight Zone. The act of rising above one's own failings, flawed characters being nudged toward redemption by supernatural means, has been completely absent. No one's learning any valuable lessons. They're just being punished. Of course, the original series did its share of punishing, but not all the time. A few random things occurred to me as I was enjoying my third viewing of Point of Origin. How did the caravan and the subsequent pilgrimages in the ensuing 30 years cross over from their dimension into ours? They never offer an explanation or even pose the question. Is there some sort of a rip in the fabric of space or reality? There are a few mentions of going back throughout the episode, which implies that the government has a way of deporting the pilgrims back to their own dimension. But, well, I guess that's not this story. One of the hallmarks of the original series is its lack of explanations, and I'm usually okay with that. I would like a bit more info here, but it's by no means a deal breaker or a point docker. Also, how do we know that the dimension depicted in the episode is our dimension? Is it possible that the gray sky dimension, decimated by some great war or other natural disaster, is actually ours? I mean, they do mention America early on in the episode, but if it's a parallel Earth, but they never call it a parallel Earth. It's a different dimension. So, I don't know. I'm actually a bit surprised that they didn't throw that particular third from the sun chestnut in at the end, revealing Eve and the other pilgrims to be from Earth.
Oh my God, I was wrong. It was Earth all along.
There's also that one line that one of Eve's tea time girlfriends says when they're talking about the undocumented help not being discreet enough.
Could expose us and them.
That kind of makes me wonder if all of their housekeepers are pilgrims, and them too. They could expose us takes on another layer of meaning in retrospect. And that moment at the end, when Allendale pauses on his way out of the Martin house and casts a glance at William before he leaves. I assume William made some sort of deal to give up Eve to protect their children. After all, they are half pilgrim. And what was it that Allendale said?
These pilgrims were diluting the natural evolution of our lives as we know it.
So wouldn't Allendale eventually come back for the literal example of that biological dilution? Only by turning in Eve could William hope to save his children. But come on. Even with the best of intentions, a deal with the devil will always bite you in the ass in the end. Those kids are not safe. One other thing. So we've got I.C.E., which of course stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And we've also got an omnipresent ice cream truck. Coincidence? Or conspiracy theory demanding further exploration?
You're the inspiration. You're the inspiration.
Other than the old switcheroo concept already discussed, the idea of people from a parallel universe or an alternate dimension crossing over into ours formed the basis of the original series episode Mirror Image. But those pilgrims were evil, bizarro doppelgangers out to replace their counterparts in our world, and we were never told there how they were crossing over either. Point of Origin actually never specifies that the pilgrims are from a parallel universe. They're from a dimension next to ours. So I guess we can assume that these pilgrims don't have counterparts here. But then again, at the end, when William says,
"You're not who you are. You never were."
I don't know, that kind of sounds like he thinks maybe she replaced his Eve at some point. But no, because she crossed over as a child, so that's not the case. So what we have is an interesting variation on the whole multiverse concept. Another world in another dimension, one populated with humans, but not the same humans. For another interesting variation on the doppelganger concept, which is definitely of the evil bizarro variety, check out Jordan Peele's film Us, which should be out on Blu-ray by the time this episode drops. I also noticed they're doing way less of the naming characters after original series characters thing, which is a good thing. A real good thing. On that note, let's turn the spotlight on the players in Point of Origin. Now, last time, I threatened to create a new jingle for this, and because I am a man of my word, I did just that.
Who are we?
The cast of characters.
Acting.
So this is where I cover the cast of the episode, at least the main players, in 1 minute or less. This is designed to prevent me from spending too much time regurgitating information that y'all can easily look up for yourselves on the IMDb or Wikipedia or wherever else y'all glean information from. This probably won't work once we're back to covering the original series, since often there are numerous connections that demand consideration. But for the new episodes, this is how we're doing it. So, 60 seconds on the clock, please. And go! In the lead as Eve Martin is Ginnifer Goodwin, probably most recognizable as Mary Margaret Blanchard, aka Snow White, on the TV series Once Upon a Time, which just ended a 7-season run on ABC.
She poisoned an apple because she thought I was prettier than her.
The mysterious and malevolent Mr. Allendale is played by James Frain, who's got all kinds of genre cred. You've seen him on True Blood, True Detective, Gotham, Orphan Black, and most recently, Star Trek Discovery, also on CBS All Access, where he plays Sarek, the full Vulcan father of half-Vulcan Spock.
Such events are clearly troubling.
Ana Fuentes is played by Sabrina Guevara, another CBS All Access veteran. You can find her in the series Tell Me a Story, and like James Frain, she also enjoyed a recurring role on Gotham.
Yeah, whatever. I get it. You're just crazy.
Toby Levins plays Eve's husband, William Martin, who you might have seen on Wayward Pines, Supernatural, Altered Carbon, and Fear the Walking Dead.
No refunds. Kid turns, it's your ass.
The enigmatic... Damn it! I had a feeling I wouldn't make it through this in 1 minute. The enigmatic Otto is played by Michael Eklund, who's also appeared on Altered Carbon, Gotham, and Supernatural. Lots of overlaps this time around. He also had a recurring role on Bates Motel.
You think I'm just some dumb, obnoxious, overbearing clown, right?
Aidea is played by Karen Konoval, who's pretty prolific in sci-fi fantasy horror circles, but her identity isn't always apparent. For example, she was all but unrecognizable under all that makeup as the incestuous Mama Peacock in the notorious X-Files episode Home in 1996.
This is our home. Why leave it? Have to check the boys, see if they hurt themselves.
She also played the orangutan Maurice in the recent Planet of the Apes trilogy, but she's more or less invisible under all that CGI. And finally, Dr. Mosher is played by Robert Mann, who you may have seen in one-off appearances on Stargate SG-1, Supernatural, Once Upon a Time. Hey, there's a Ginnifer Goodwin connection. He also played a character named Hillbilly Ed in the 2018 episode Kitten on The X-Files.
First he thought it was a bear, but then he saw big old horns, and it was walking on 2 feet.
And there's your cast. Do I get at least partial points for keeping it under 2 minutes? Yeah, I didn't think so. So I've watched Point of Origin 3 times. I liked it okay the first time, I really liked it the second time, and now I love it. For me, it's up there near the top, right under 6 Degrees of Freedom, with probably replay just after it. As this 10-episode season nears its end, I'm starting to see it more as a single work, a 10-part anthology. I mean, duh, that's exactly what it is. But I mean, it feels more like a unified whole. And I imagine that's what they were going for. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stuffed it to the gills with so many callbacks and references to other episodes. So, the other day, I asked myself, do I really hate any of these new episodes? I was initially displeased with The Comedian and Nightmare at 30,000 Feet. I was really unimpressed with A Traveler. The Wonderkind was an exercise in eye-rolling, which is to say, it's my least favorite. I mean, so far, there are still 2 more to go. By the time this installment of the podcast drops, all 10 episodes will have aired, and, a bit unexpectedly, black and white versions of all 10 episodes are now available alongside the color versions. I have mixed feelings about this, and I haven't watched any of them yet. But I am looking forward to finding out if my opinions of the episodes will change after seeing them that way. I guess my point is, I'm open to the possibilities. I'm willing to change my mind about the episodes I've been less than thrilled with. As I've said before, this stuff is all brand new. It'll be years before I can conclusively decide if I love them, like them, tolerate them, or outright hate them. Hell, I still change my mind about original series episodes, and I've been watching those for over 35 years. So, yeah, we didn't get around to covering the Blue Scorpion this time like we planned. Right now, I'm planning on covering it and the season finale Blurry Man together next time, but we'll see. Now, I've only watched each of those once, and I was eyeballs deep researching and reviewing other episodes, so I didn't have time to really start digesting them. That's why I end up with 3 viewings of each episode. The initial viewing, and then later, 2 more as I am preparing my notes for the podcast. Now, my original intent was to avoid the episodes entirely until I got to them, but every Thursday I cave because I can't fucking wait, because what if the next one is the greatest thing ever? I don't want to find out on the internet that the greatest thing ever is sitting there waiting for me, and I'm duty-bound to ignore it until I eventually get to it. So yeah, I watch them as soon as they're released. In fact, I've been getting up early on Thursdays and watching them before I go to work. But on that viewing, I'm not taking any notes. I'm just kind of letting it all wash over me. And then I go to work and forget most of what I just watched. My point? I don't honestly remember the final 2 episodes enough at this point to know how long they'll take to properly cover. And I won't know until I'm, well, eyeballs deep into them. So I guess we'll see. I guess the upside is the more episodes I like, the more I have to say about them, which means more episodes of the podcast. So if you're into the whole quantity thing, then you probably appreciate that. But I don't know, I imagine there are at least a few listeners who would prefer that I take a brevity pill and hurry the hell up. If you want me to hurry the hell up, let me know. Because, hey, we love interaction with our listeners, and you can provide that interaction via multiple social media avenues. We're at ZonePod on Facebook, at Twilight Crab on Instagram, and at Zone Crab on Twitter. Those wishing for a deeper, more involved meeting of the minds can email us at zonepod@gmail.com. And hey, like and or share our posts. On second thought, like and share them. And iTunes ratings and reviews would be most appreciated. Though it was just recently announced that Apple is killing iTunes and branching podcasts off into a standalone app, so I'm not 100% clear how that will work. I do hope the search function is improved. You can't even find us anymore on iTunes if you search for Twilight Zone Podcast, even though Twilight Zone Podcast is part of our name. But if you search for Twilight Zone Podcast Craig or Between Light and Shadow, there we are. It's crazy. So, come back in about 2 weeks and we'll look at the Blue Scorpion and maybe Blurry Man 2. Until then, kids, be wary of ice cream trucks cruising by your house in the wintertime. And as always, play nice.
Between light and shadow.
Hi-oh!